Astragar presents Risk Tales. Conversations on how vulnerabilities, threats, cyber resilience, governance, regulation, and risk quantification are evolving in an age of AI, digital transformation, and systemic exposure. Featuring leaders from insurance, banks and financial institutions, enterprise risk, capital markets, technology, and public policy. This is Risk Tales.
Hello everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to this very exciting episode. We're going to have a great conversation for the next half an hour or so with regards to insurance technology. We are very happy to have with us today Mr. Dan Israel. Dan serves as the Managing Director of the Global Insurance Accelerator, helping to facilitate insurtech innovation and startup mentorship with a focus on connecting early stage founders with industry leader career partners. Dan is passionate about building a more agile and resilient insurance future. His expertise lies in identifying scalable solutions for the industry's most pressing challenges and cultivating the collaborative networks required to bring them to the market. A champion for the insurtech community, Dan is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs turn visionary concepts into sustainable industry standards. Dan, thank you so much for your time today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I should take you along with me wherever I go for that kind of introduction. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that I have with you today. Let's start with the evolution of the insurance technology. Now, insurance has historically been seen as a very conservative industry when it comes to technology adoption. So from your perspective, please tell us, how has the insurance technology evolved over the last decade? And what shifts have surprised you the most?
I appreciate, again, the opportunity to be on the podcast today, and I appreciate the question. I think the insurance industry and financial services is still a conservative industry, and that I don't think has changed over the last 10 years and likely is not going to change dramatically over the next 10 years to come. But I do think what's changed a little bit is we've moved from talking about transformation to more implementing it over the last probably, in the 4 years that I've been running this organization, as well as my time previously at former employers. We've had the opportunity to see real ideas become real products or real services or real solutions that companies can actually impart, rather than let's figure out a part of the strategy that we want to go look at and implement. So I think the biggest changes that I see are more willingness to engage and more willingness to implement some of the different pieces and parts of the solutions that are out there. I think it highlights, for me, also a conviction and a realization that the work that we do at the Global Insurance Accelerator is as important as ever as it has been, because what we're able to do is we're out looking for the very best startups at that earlier stage that are solving the real problems of today. And we're finding that we can get better engagement from our investors and from our partners and from the overall ecosystem, maybe even today, than we've had in the past, because they're being asked more questions by their boards and by their leaders about what change is coming and how they best can implement. So I think it's more of a willingness to engage and a willingness to participate is probably the biggest change that I've seen. The solutions, the insurance industry is still based around understanding risk and paying out that risk if it happens. And so that also hasn't changed. So it's really about how do they engage with it.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for that insight. So we hear a lot about digital transformation in the insurance sector. So in practical terms, what does that actually look like for insurers, brokers, and even managing general agents in today's day and age?
Another really good question. And, maybe I start by saying, I think digital transformation is one of those phrases that if you asked 100 people, you might get 100 different definitions of what digital transformation is. And that in and of itself is probably, part of the answer there. If you look at how digital transformation is impacting, some of them are really focused more on, how do they get off of some of their legacy systems or update some of those systems so that they can implement some of the new tools or some of the new technologies that they're seeing come across. As you go into, more of the brokers and the MGAs, it's probably less of that tech debt, if you will, and more thinking about the different solutions that are out there. But I think the companies that are doing this best and thinking about digital transformation are the ones that are tying what they're doing to where they want to go and what that strategy looks like. Because, again, for certain companies, digital transformation really can be just getting updated off of their legacy systems and putting themselves in a position in order to meet the technology of tomorrow. And for some, it is about building out new products, new services, and that can look different kind of for everybody. So again, I probably push back a little bit on the digital transformation being just a easily definable term, and more about how each of these companies can understand where they need to go and what they need to do, and then find the right solutions, technology that can help them get there from the point that they're at today.
I mean, I think the most fascinating thing about this conversation, Dan, is that especially about the insurance space, people know and understand so little. So there are a lot of these misconceptions, there are a lot of these preconceived notions that exist. So yeah, speaking to an expert like yourself, it really kind of, I mean, for laymen, for people like me, I wouldn't know anything about it, but so for me this is really educational. So thank you once again for all those insights.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I do think, the interesting part of this too, and one of the things that I've learned in my time leading this accelerator is there's some really amazing experts out there. And I won't claim to be the smartest person in most of the rooms that I'm going to walk into. There are great founders and great mentors and great leaders across all of these organizations that have such a deep knowledge that we have a real benefit of bringing together, so that I don't have to try and be, that much of an expert. I can talk about the trends and where things go, but we really are fortunate to have a lot of really, really smart people that understand this in a lot of great depth and can understand how to put the picture together.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, well, next we come to, one of the most important aspects with this, which is the cyber risk and the expanding threat landscape. So from an insurance perspective, what are the biggest vulnerabilities companies have today that could impact their ability to obtain or maintain cyber coverage, in your opinion?
As I just said, probably a good question for a couple of our portfolio companies and companies that have come through our program, like Astragar, like Cowbell. I see, and even from our own business, that we are asked about as we're thinking about cyber coverage and the different types of insurance and products that we can bring in. The risk is, I think it's transitioned a little bit from assuming that I'm necessarily going to click on something or where the risk comes from, but more of what's the third party risk that you need to really be careful of. Who are your partners and what are their vulnerabilities? And if you're bringing, outside folks in, how do you make sure that they are connecting into your ecosystem in the right way? And those are harder questions to answer, right? Because it's easy for me to understand who has access internally to all of our different systems and where it's going. Becomes harder as you think about how far out that goes, and as you have more and more partners. And I'd certainly advocate that partnership is a good thing, but it is about understanding how prepared some of your parties are, and then leading to that preparedness. The other part is, it seems today like it's less about just your ability to have a coverage or have something. It becomes more about your ability to respond should an incident happen. I remember not incredibly long ago when, a credit card breach made major national news because, it was kind of one of the first times that it happened. And today, I don't know, I probably once a month get a letter in the mail from somebody that says my information has been stolen by somewhere, and they're offering the service to track my identity, and that's just how you respond. And so I think it is about better understanding the real risk, and that leads to where I think what we've seen, especially companies like Astragar, right, coming through our program that are more focused on real-time monitoring, understanding where those real potential problems are and how do you protect against that. And I think that's probably the biggest shift that we've seen is it's gone from kind of this fill out this survey and understand your risk to needing to really understand where the true vulnerability is at all times, and how you can be better prepared should something happen, because it's just becoming more and more likely that it will.
So do you think it has become, risks and vulnerabilities have become more quantifiable now? I mean, earlier, as you rightly said, 10 years ago, it was just a matter of filling up or ticking a few boxes. But now I think it's more specific. Is my understanding correct?
I think so. And I think, we've seen it in the companies that are coming through our program in the ways that, they're evaluating what that risk is. I think you can better understand that risk. I think it takes a specialized organization to be able to know, what the vulnerability looks like and how best to assess it, how real the vulnerability is and what the potential impact is should it happen. I still think that requires a specialist and help. I would struggle myself to understand probably all of the risks that our organization has, but I do think that there's information out there, and there's organizations like Astrogar that can, better understand and better quantify what those real-time impacts are. And that's what we've seen through our applications and through the, some of the conversations that we're having with our partners, is there's a stronger need and a stronger appetite to understand what those risks are. And to your point, I do think it's easier today to understand it. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily easier to prevent it, but I do think it makes it you're more able now to understand where those vulnerabilities lie.
Fascinating, absolutely. I'd like to come next to, something that everybody's talking about, which is AI and the automation in insurance. So artificial intelligence, currently it has been integrated across many parts of the insurance value chain. So in your opinion, where exactly do you see AI delivering the most meaningful impact right now? Underwriting, claims, fraud detection, or do you see something completely somewhere else?
Yeah. Another really great question, and another one that's hard to answer beyond saying, I think every company is looking at AI in some form or fashion. And I think for some companies that means, hey, we've implemented Copilot and we're doing great, or some version of, an assistant. To other companies that are, determining more of what real use cases might be. If I think fundamentally about insurance and what this space is intended to do, right? It is about understanding risk that exists, pricing that risk should that risk occur, and then if that risk occurs, paying out according to the contract that was made. And so where I think AI can have probably its biggest impact right now is exactly where you talked about. It's around claims, it's around underwriting, potentially around some of the fraud detection. But I do think as you look at the end-to-end process of understanding the risk, underwriting that risk, and then paying that risk out should the claim happen, AI can help to streamline, probably is the right word, those different work streams. I think the companies that are doing it best are not just trying to put, AI on front of everything that they're doing today. It's reevaluating what that process should be and making it more efficient, making it easier for your customers to engage, making it easier for your employees to get through that process, to better understand, to better price, to better pay out the claims. That's where I think it can have the biggest impact, because I think there's probably the lowest barrier to entry for something there versus, completely, obliterating teams or doing things like that. I'm probably less on the doomsday scenario of what it might mean to jobs and things like that. But I think it can be a tool that we are going to have to figure out how to continue to learn and continue to better leverage. But I do think it's probably right now primarily around claims, underwriting, and as you brought up, some of the fraud protection, right? It's easier and easier to create things today than it ever has been. And how do you make sure that even if you're thinking about damage, photo damages of cars and houses and things like that, how do you make sure that those things aren't being created when there's not real damage too? So I think it can cut across all of those things, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So, right. So moving on. So AI, what you said and what you explained, absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, it also introduces its own risk.
Yes.
So, what are the new exposures or governance challenges should the insurers in particular, and companies should be thinking about as they deploy, as you said, as technology is evolving and as companies and insurance companies are deploying more AI tools.
Yep.
So, what are the new exposures and challenges do you reckon?
Yeah, I think insurance and financial services is such a highly regulated industry. And not just here in the U.S., but across the world, right? It touches almost everything, but it's also regulated by lots of different parties and people here in the U.S., right? We have 50 different insurance regulatory bodies across all of the different states. At some point, right, there's been some regulations that have come down that have tried to standardize the use of AI and what that looks like in Europe the same way. I think part of the challenge will be that you've got to continue to be up on what those regulations are, specifically around AI and its use. But more fundamentally, the more that AI is used, the challenge becomes how do you avoid it being just a black box, right? At some point, you have to be able to articulate the reasoning and the logic that a decision was made, especially if you think about, a claims tool that, are evaluating a claim and you've got AI taking the first stab. If it is rejecting a much higher percentage, even if it might be correct, you've got to be able to justify to a human how that's working. And that to me is probably the biggest challenge that companies need to be really thinking about, is an awareness of how it works and an awareness of how do you justify what it's spitting out, and can you recreate that result if you remove the AI. And again, right, it can be more efficient, it can change the paradigm of how something operates, but it's got to be in a way that is relatable and understandable. And the more that it just is hey, trust us, the model works, that's where you're going to run into a lot of problems where people won't trust that model, won't allow that. And I think that's where you're going to run into more problems with the regulators.
Absolutely. Right. Moving on. So as whatever we understand of AI today, I mean, what I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're the expert, you can probably tell me if my understanding is correct or not. Things are changing probably on a monthly basis, if not weekly.
Yes.
What we knew about AI, let's say 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and what's happening today is like, it's going in leaps and bounces. Absolutely. So if we were to look ahead 5 years, 10 years, I know it's a very long time considering that the technology is shifting in every 3 months. But still, how do you think that the emerging technologies like AI and automation and advanced analytics will fundamentally change how risk is assessed and assured within the insurance space?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see it. To your point, right? Even in the last, not just the last 4 years that I've been leading this organization, but in the last year and in the last 6 months, right? The number of different ways that AI and this kind of technology is being used is drastically different than it was 4 years ago. And I think, if I thought about some of the applications that we saw when I first started in this role, it was, AI was the flashing light bulb and it was the thing. Today, that paradigm has shifted to be, this is the solution that we provide to the problem that exists. AI is an underpinning of how we're solving this problem, but it is a translation issue or a change that has, I think, better met the times where everybody assumes, or it's a more known commodity today. It's not just, hey, I'm using AI and that's enough. It has to be in service of solving something better. To your question, though, I think that probably the way that I see it will continue to change is this kind of concept more of continuous risk assessment, as opposed to kind of point in time where I'm filling out an application and that sets then the payment and the cost and the risk associated. You've seen that with things like telematics and in cars or for weather. The ability to understand more of that real time risk and price and underwrite it in that kind of more real time fashion, I think is going to continue to evolve. And I think more and more different types of insurance will move to that model. And I think more and more, we'll get smarter about how we're pricing things. We'll get smarter about how we're underwriting risk, and we'll get smarter about how things are claimed out. I do think, again, this is another reason that I'm so bullish on where the GIA is today and where it goes, because we have such an ability to be on kind of the tip of the spear for the different technologies that are out there, the different trends that we're seeing within the industry. We're bringing those types of companies at an early stage. And so for our investors, our partners, our sponsors, our ecosystem, they get access to tell us these are the biggest things that we're seeing and the challenges that we're trying to solve. In the meantime, it also is, an ability to say, let's go look out another 3 to 5 years, even though we know it will be different. What are the things that we should be on the lookout for? And that's a reason I'm so excited about what we do today and where we'll continue to push.
Yeah, exciting times indeed. So I come to my last question, Dan. Thank you so much for all those insights. So today, what you said, I mean, GIA is a fascinating platform, absolutely fascinating platform. So in your experience, if you could give, so you've probably been working with startups and entrepreneurs for the last, as you said, 4 years, 5 years. Yeah, so within the insurance space. So you've probably seen, observed, watched, mentored closely how this space and the new entrepreneurs and the new startups are evolving. So if you could give just one piece of advice to business leaders today who are trying to navigate cyber risk and technological disruption, what would it be?
I think the advice that I would give, and this kind of comes from my time in strategy and in operations, is treat it like a strategic operational risk rather than just something that you need to buy insurance against. Have real conversations at the leadership level with your board, with your management team, with your investors about what that risk is and how you're going to account for that risk as a part of your ongoing strategy. If you treat it just as something that you can buy a policy for and then give that policy to the CFO or your finance team or whomever, right, to manage and make sure that the bill gets paid, you're not really going to understand that risk, and you're not going to have an ability to build a more resilient organization, as well as think about how your business model likely is going to change because of some of the new technologies that will be coming down or some of the risks that you're going to have to understand. And so I think the companies that we see it doing really well are the ones that are having a real conversation about it, not just within kind of a finance team that is looking at the insurance. And I am a former finance guy, so I say that with a lot of love, but it's how you bring it up a level and make sure that the leadership team is really focused on it too.
Absolutely fascinating, Dan. On that note, I think we will conclude our conversation today. Again, thank you so much for your time, for all those insights. I'm sure everyone, all our audiences would love whatever we discussed today. And I hope to have you soon with me once again on some other topics, because as you said, this space is evolving so quickly. In 3 months' time, who knows what more comes up. So yeah, exciting times. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you. And thank you once again for your time. Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You've been listening to Risk Tales, presented by Astragar.